Caleb Cunningham to Auburn would end the passing game curse. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I am Lindsay, Crosby, writer for AuburnDaily.com, filling in for Zach Blackerby, who is making his way back from international waters. You should see him again tomorrow. Joined by my co-host, Montgomery radio legend Darrell Dapprich. And Darrell, there was a lot of recruits on campus this weekend, and a lot of, not only recruits, really good recruits. Auburn has a class that is top 10 right now, despite not having a 5-star commitment. There are 3 5-stars that, as of time of recording, just left campus a couple hours ago. And I think that Caleb Cunningham, the wide receiver, is probably the best one of the group. And if Auburn can land him, definitely someone that could go a long way towards fixing the reputation of Auburn as a run-over passing school.
Caleb Cunningham is the kind of guy that Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, those type of receivers in that echelon, in that class. He's a 5-star receiver from Choctaw County in Mississippi. Ackerman, Mississippi is the name of the town he's from. Mississippi State right now looks to be the team to beat. I don't mean this arrogantly, but I like that. I like that Auburn can go head-to-head with Mississippi State after what Auburn just did in this last recruiting cycle with Thompson, Kane, Simmons, and Coleman. So that would just continue the trend, Lindsay, of getting elite receivers. And right now, I think he is the most prized target. I mean, we can talk about the other kids we'll talk about in a second that are also 5 stars. As you mentioned, 9 kids visited this weekend. 3 were 5 stars, 5 4 stars, just elite talent all the way across the board. But Cunningham is the get. And it's amazing that he met with some reporters and some beat writers and some guys from On3 and now says that Auburn leads. What does that mean? Not to burst anyone's bubble? Nothing. Until it's nice to have him on campus. It's nice to say that Auburn leads, but it's a long way to go. But I think Auburn made up a lot of ground this weekend with one Caleb Cunningham, who, make no mistake, is the prize jewel in this recruiting class if Auburn gets him.
Yeah, and to kind of clean something up real quick, a lot of people are going to hear that it's nice to know you can compete with Mississippi State thing, and they're going to think that we're talking about, like, you should be competing with them for recruits. You competed with Georgia and Alabama and things like that. This is a local Mississippi kid. And
right, that's
what we've noticed. Yeah. Mississippi and Louisiana, those 2 states are difficult for a lot of schools to go into those states and get the best players out of those states. So it is a significant factor that he is from Mississippi and that Auburn is one of the front runners now with ostensibly a school that he grew up watching in Mississippi State. Mm-hmm. He took an official visit in the fall, and then he also took one to Ole Miss. So he has already done officials to both of the in-state powerhouses, to use lack of a better word. And after this weekend with Auburn, he has Florida and Tennessee and Alabama. He's made multiple unofficial visits to campus here. Obviously, this was a big thing here. And like you said, the highest profile, but not by any means the only top player who came this weekend. And we're going to get back to Cunningham in just a minute in that second segment. But Blake Woodby, a cornerback out of Baltimore, Maryland, was here this weekend. One of the fastest players in the class, and probably going to be an outside corner. And we know that at Auburn, those roles aren't necessarily, are kind of a little more delineated outside versus nickel than a lot of other schools. But he's a guy that was committed to Ohio State, and to have him here has more officials coming up. Have to feel about what he could do with the program if he were to sign.
Yeah, Woodby's a kid that's been crystal balled by numerous scouting services to Auburn, which is nice. In fact, as we record this, at the time of the recording this, I would have expected, I thought that he might have given his commitment to Auburn over the weekend. Hasn't happened yet. Doesn't mean it can't happen in the next couple days.
We waited as long as we could, people.
We did wait as long as we could. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'm just joking. I think that one of the things to look at is it's not just 1 or 2 sites. It's numerous sites that are saying he is going to be crystal ball to Auburn. So those are usually pretty accurate. I would expect him in this class. Very good corner, like you said, a lot of speed. Maryland and a couple other schools are on him pretty good. I've got actually Oregon, Florida, Michigan. So, I mean, there's some pretty high dudes, high-ranked schools that are after Woodby. Would be a great get from Baltimore, Maryland. Just really broadening that recruiting footprint is what I like about it. When you get kids from Mississippi, as you mentioned, with Cunningham going against Mississippi State, now you go all the way into Baltimore, Maryland to get a kid. I love that expanding footprint for recruiting.
Yeah, he's a top 25 play according to ESPN. Brian Smith over at Auburn Daily has a really helpful primer on all of these guys if you want more information, auburndaily.com. But I also like how he threw in who has them rated the highest. Another top-rated player, the number 1 player in Alabama, quarterback Naeem Offord out of Birmingham, committed to Ohio State, but came to visit Auburn. And this is something, do you think it's right to read into the fact that they have multiple 5-star cornerbacks coming to visit on the same weekend? Am I right to read into that the staff is saying this is a need for us going forward, or you think that's more of a coincidence than anything else?
No, I think it's a blueprint. I think it's a definite blueprint, a definite recruiting strategy. What's interesting about Offord is this is a kid that originally wasn't planning to stay the whole weekend in camp with Auburn and now is. So that's a big deal that he has decided to stay an extra day in camp. Him and Woodby took a lot of pictures together and really hung out. And Hugh Freeze made it very well known to some beat writers that this is a guy that Hugh Freeze cannot afford to lose, that he wants in this class, even though he's committed to Ohio State. I think he's also a high priority along with Woodby. You talk about getting 2 lockdown corners in one class. This would be epic if Auburn could pull this off.
Yeah, and kind of talking about having multiple guys at the same position. Tight end Emery Winston out of Calhoun, Georgia, committed to Texas right now. Really one of those flex tight ends, 6'2", 230 right now. But he was here on a visit as well. You already have Ryan Gay, not quite sure how you say his last name. I get that wrong every time. But you already have him committed. He's more of a traditional tight end in that class. So this would give you 2 guys, distinct play styles. Winston's a guy, he could be a fullback or an H-back in short yardage. You can get him out in space on a linebacker, let him make plays at the passing game. A lot of options there. I like the idea of let's double up and have these guys build relationships now. This is obviously assuming you sign Winston, but it's a sign that they have a specific strategy here, and they're not afraid to double up at a position when they find a right mix of guys to combine on the field.
Well, I think, tight end's a position that you can have your traditional pass-catching tight end. You can have what's called a flex tight end, and Auburn is really, really going after a lot of flex tight ends that, as you mentioned, can play multiple positions, can slide into the H-back role. And then you've got your traditional just blocking tight end it's kind of going away by the wayside of just a kid that can come in that's a plow type guy in run situations, but you still have a need for that. So, there's various ways to look at tight end and hybrid positions. And I think Auburn's trying to keep the flexibility between the flex and the traditional tight end, how they can use them different spots on the field. Remember, a lot of tight ends now are being used in a kind of a receiver role where they put them out wide. I think the Kyle, I'm drawing a blank, the kid from the Falcons that played at Florida.
Kyle Pitts.
Kyle Pitts was the first guy that really, you look at that kid and you go, he could be a receiver. And they flexed him out wide. So I think that Auburn's looking for that versatility and that hybrid. And this is a kid that's committed to Texas, but said he had a really good visit as well. And, of course, a lot of these kids are going to say that. They're talking to Auburn beat writers and that kind of thing. So take that with a grain of salt. But I think Hugh Freeze and his staff does a really good job once these kids get on campus with the detail, the structure, making sure that they have a really good time and feel like they're really, really focused on them and they're really important. This staff is really good at that. And so once you get them on campus, I think that's a feather in Auburn's cap with the way this staff recruits.
Okay. Pause real quick because my computer completely just like froze for a second and I couldn't pull up any. And Auburn playing this great weekend, but still a little bit of surprise. Yeah, you had multiple offensive linemen, a flex guy, but Edge Anthony Jones was a surprise visitor to Auburn. I don't quite think they knew he was coming. 5-star out of Mobile, uncommitted right now, and he kind of showed up when the weekend started and spent the weekend here as well. Is this something like, should we pay extra attention to the fact that he came when he's uncommitted, or is that just one of those, you think he was around and bored and stopped by?
No, I think there's definitely a method to this. I think that anytime you get a surprise visitor from a 5-star that's 3 hours away, I mean, we're not talking about the kid plays at Opelika or Auburn or, Central Phoenix City. He's all the way down at St. Paul's Episcopal, which, by the way, is a football factory down there. He's 6'4", 240 edge, prototypical edge, just a beast, a monster, a guy that Auburn would really love to get, especially with the edges moving on and graduating and using up their eligibility in Crawford and Jones, or Crawford and McLeod. So I think that this is a good get for Auburn if they're able to get him. It's huge. He's a 5-star. But the fact that he showed up when Auburn was expecting 8 visitors and he was number 9 and he was the third 5-star, I think is big. I don't want to read too much into it, but I think it's better that he came and he, again, where he came from and that he wanted to be. And the fact that he's with some of these other guys, the other 5-stars that showed up, the Cunninghams and those guys, I think that's very, very important.
Yeah. And a lot of other notable guys here. Broderick Schultz, an offensive tackle out of Oklahoma. That's really impressive. Again, auburndaily.com has a great write-up from Brian, all of these guys, all the info you need to know about them. In just a minute, I want to talk about if Caleb Cunningham were to come to Auburn, would that give Auburn the most talented wide receiver room they've ever had? We'll discuss that next, right here on Locked On Auburn. I'll edit that out too. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your vehicle running at peak performance. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit right the first time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your vehicle running at peak performance at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Lindsay, Crosby, Darrell, Dapprich filling in for Zach Blackerby on Locked On Auburn. And we talked about Caleb Cunningham, about what I'm going to say freak he is, what a freak athlete he is, and how that caliber of player can do a lot for your team. But, Darrell, if you were to sign Caleb Cunningham and you add him into this room, and I'm going to, real quick, here's the depth chart. Cam Coleman, obviously, we're assuming is going to be your starter at the X. You've got Keandre Lambert-Smith, will be a senior. He's probably moving on. Robert Lewis, be a senior, probably moving on. Sam Jackson, senior, moving on. But you'll have Bryce Kane. You'll have another year of Camden Brown. You'll have Caleb Burton. All of these guys. If you add Caleb Cunningham to that room, one, is that the most talented wide receiver room in Auburn history? And is that the most talented wide receiver room in the SEC in 2025 if Caleb Cunningham is in there?
Well, let's go with the first one. In Auburn history, on paper, yes. Obviously, that has to translate to the field. We've seen Coleman in an A-Day scenario. We haven't seen Perry Thompson yet with pads on in a game series. So if these guys project to what they're supposed to be, and the four with Kane and Simmons as well, yes, if you throw Cunningham into that mix for 2025, on paper, it would be the most talent in an Auburn receiving room ever. And it's important because you don't want to have one-off years on this. If Auburn wants to get where it needs to get offensively and at an elite level as far as a college football program again, the sustainability of receiving rooms and stacking these type of receiving rooms are important. I hate to compare schools, but you look at like what Alabama did in receivers class after class when Florida was hitting on all cylinders, what they've done. LSU, especially in the Florida years, I was thinking more Spurrier, LSU. You do it, and you do it again the next year, and you do it again the year after. It's not a one-off. And that's where Auburn needs to really stack recruiting classes. If they do this, they start to become a reputation of a place to go to get receivers. And then you have to start putting receivers in the NFL. You have to get them to the next level. Because at one point, I think you can get good college receivers for a couple years, but if these guys aren't going on and playing in the league and hearing their name called on draft day in the first or second round, it's a tough sell. So all those things have to come into play, but what needs to start is getting them in the class to begin with. And yes, this would be, the best receiving class that are on paper that they've had. As far as SEC, hard to tell. I don't know what other classes, right? What other schools are going to do in the way of their recruits.
Yeah. All right. So I'm thinking about Auburn here, and I'm thinking about, I'm only like, I'm not as old as everybody thinks I am. And so let's look at last 20, 25 years of Auburn classes, right? I'm thinking
I can do that because I am that old. So let's roll. Okay. Let's go. Okay.
I'm thinking 2019, right? So you've got Anthony Schwartz, you've got Javarius Johnson, you've got Seth Williams, you've got Will Hastings, who was a really great college receiver. Eli Stove. There's talent in that room. I feel like that's probably the most just raw, sheer talent Auburn has had in a wide receiver room in the last 20, 25 years. Am I forgetting a year there?
Well, there were some years that Auburn had a couple of 5 stars. I believe Kyle Davis and Nate Craig Myers came very, very highly touted.
But that very much is a on paper thing.
On paper thing. That's exactly right. That's why maybe I'm a little bit PTSD with that, or a little bit, wanting to pump the brakes, because that class was supposed to have like 3 elite receivers and they just didn't pan out. They showed flashes. Mm-hmm. But as we said, they never panned out. So, I think the 2019 with Hastings, Schwartz, and Williams, they were productive. They got things done. I can go all the way back to here we go. You talk about old. Okay. The teams that in the mid 90s under Terry Bowden that had Frank Sanders at one receiver and Thomas Bailey at the other. And those were 2 guys that were really, really good, had a lot of production, and you couldn't double cover one or the other because they both did a lot of damage. So those 2, Auburn has never in my lifetime been known to be a school that has had elite receivers and put receivers in the league in the first or second round. Go back and look. It hasn't happened that often. I mean, Darius Slayton's become a good receiver in the league, but at Auburn, he didn't put up the kind of numbers I think we could have.
They keep trying to replace him in New York every year. They keep drafting receivers, trying to find somebody better than him, and they can't do it. But and that's kind of what I alluded to in the open with the curse of Auburn's passing game is you've never had production on the field that either one matched the talent that you had on paper, or that you would expect from a team that has multiple national championships and has historically been a very good team in the best conference in college football. And so it feels like, obviously, talent acquisition is the first part of that. If you can get those guys, that is a huge deal. And then obviously you have to perform on the field, and that's a conversation for 2025 and things like that. But getting those guys is important. Talking about performing on the field, Auburn's lack of performance on the field has caused an interesting scheduling quirk for this year's matchup with the University of Georgia. We'll talk about that next, right here on Locked On Auburn. Lindsay, Crosby, Darrell, Dapprich here on the Monday episode of Locked On Auburn. Thank you for everybody for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Zach Blackerby has been on vacation for his anniversary. He should be back on tomorrow's show. So thank you for all the kind comments you've left us, all of the words of encouragement, the tweets, the YouTube comments. We see the good ones. The bad ones, Darrell gets in and deletes those before I get to them.
There you go.
There was a little bit of controversy late last week because this year you are playing Georgia on October 5th, right? That's historically been a November matchup. You played them right there near when you went to Alabama, and it was a really tough 2 games in 3 week kind of stretch there. You're playing them October 5th, and UGA announced that it was their homecoming matchup this year. And there's quite a few Auburn players not thrilled about that. I saw some stuff here. I've got Jarquez Hunter reposted it on Instagram and left a comment on that. So did Damari Alston. So did Eugene Asante. And it's all one of those, the disrespect. They talked about, the respect or the lack of respect and things like that from UGA. Last week, we talked about, I'm going to say the futility with Georgia football recently. And in that matchup, is it a good thing that we are their homecoming opponent? Is this the kind of motivation we needed? Or is this just a way for them to needle a rival that they feel like is a little bit below them?
Both. I've always said, it's my moniker. You're going to put it on my tombstone that 2 things can be true at once. Make no mistake about it. This is very disrespectful. It is. And Kirby's smart, doesn't care. That's how he is. It's Georgia, regardless of what their fans will say. I've said it before. I said it last week. Auburn is Georgia's biggest rival. So typically you would not put your biggest rival at a homecoming game. So that they'll push back and say, well, that proves that you're not. But that's not the case. Here's the deal. Auburn hasn't proven in a very long time that it can be competitive in Athens. So Georgia doesn't think twice about putting Auburn as its homecoming opponent. Auburn's earned that. They have to wear it, okay? And until they do something about it, like the bully on the beach, it continues to get sand kicked in their face, put up or shut up. If you don't like it, yes, it's disrespectful. Yes, it's a joke. Yes, it's a poke. Okay, do something about it. Do something about it. So that's why I love seeing the players come out with such passion. It woke them up. There ain't no doubt that there's no sleepy time. Auburn's going to be ready to play. They always are in Athens. But I think there's going to be an edge that they come with this year because of that and feeling disrespected. Now, what does that do? Does that carry over 2-3 quarters? No. At the end of the day, it's still X's and O's and Jimmy's and Joe's and blocking and tackling. But I think that Auburn wanting to change the narrative, only Auburn can do that. If you're tired of being disrespected, then don't be a team that allows itself to be disrespected. Play tough in Athens. Be in the game late in the 4th quarter. That's the only way you're going to shut this up and shut this narrative down and earn the respect that you feel like you're supposed to have, is get it on the field. It's time to basically do it and quit talking about it.
Quick reminder for everybody, Auburn won in Athens. The last time was 2005. You won 31-30. And then prior to that, it was 2001. You won 24-17. You haven't won a multi-score game in Athens since, I believe, 1999. It was 38-21. So that's kind of explains to you why they're confident doing this. I went and pulled the Georgia schedule just for fun, right? And they start off with Clemson, neutral site. Obviously doesn't work there. Tennessee Tech, September 7th, too early for homecoming, right? At Kentucky, at Alabama, home for Auburn, homecoming. The next week, home for Mississippi State. They had an alternative.
They sure did.
They had an alternative, and they specifically chose, no, we're going to do Auburn instead of Mississippi State because we have owned Auburn in Athens for 20 years now. And like you said, if you want it to change, put up or shut up. Go out there. At the end of the day, you got to play better. That's what you got to do. And so Auburn's going to be, you kept it a 1-score game last year. Auburn's going to be looking to go in and take it to Georgia this year in Athens amidst the hedges. And honestly, I want to see some of those hedges come home as souvenirs when Auburn's done with this game.
Well, 2 points. Number one, they shoot themselves in the foot, Georgia does, because you're going to get all your alumni and all your fans to come on campus for the Auburn game. Again, they'll deny it, but they are whistling by the graveyard, and they're in denial if they say that's not the case. Auburn's their biggest rival. It's their biggest home game, okay?
From a marketing standpoint, you really should have done Mississippi State if your
because
goal is to sell at the stadium. Yeah,
exactly. And then the second thing, when we were talking about receivers, totally ironic, and what a great segue, the greatest receiving performance I've ever seen with my own eyeballs at Auburn was that 1999 Auburn-Georgia game you were talking about. A guy named Ronnie Daniels. He was over 230 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, could you imagine at Auburn? He was elite, dominant. The best performance I've ever seen from a receiver. I've seen Frank Sanders. I've seen some great ones. That, bar none. Against a rival like that, couldn't stop him. How sweet would that be if Cam Coleman went over there to Athens and put 2 bills up on them? Not saying it was going to happen, but that would be sweet. The kind of performance that Auburn needs to go on the road and steal one.
Pulled the box score here. 9 catches, 249 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Had a long of 78 yards and averaged 27.6 yards of reception.
It was elite.
That is absurd. Cam Coleman, gauntlet is thrown. That is your challenge for Auburn versus Georgia on October 5th in Athens. Darrell, thank you for this week plus of being my co-host here. Where can the Auburn family go to give you more love and get more of your amazing football and basketball takes for Auburn?
Well, thank you, first of all. You did all the hard work with the technical stuff and setting everything up, so thank you. You did an excellent job producing the show. Lindsay Crosby, producer and content creator. DAP6410 on X, Monday mornings, WANI with Ben Taylor, Tuesday afternoons at 3:15 on the line with our good friend Jacob Goins, and then Wednesdays and Fridays with Zach Blackerby. And then some of my written work will be coming out here soon on Auburn Daily.
Been a good week. Zach Blackerby is back tomorrow. In the meantime, do us a favor. Go out, give the show a 5-star review. If you're on audio, if you're on YouTube, leave us a like on the show. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Leave comments for Zach about how much you enjoyed having us here while he was on his vacation. So he lets us do this the next time he's gone. And until next time, this has been Locked on Auburn.